We assume the everyday environments we navigate are entirely under our control. We trust our computerized locks, our climate-controlled cabins, and our electronic ignitions to obey our commands. But that security only exists right up until a single mechanism fails to open. In 2015, 72-year-old James Lee Rogers felt a deep sense of pride every time he got behind the wheel of his 2007 Chevy Corvette. To him, it was a technological marvel. It lacked traditional door handles, relying entirely on sleek electric push-button mechanisms to operate. On a blistering June morning in Port Arthur, Texas, James left his dog inside the air-conditioned Corvette and stepped into a Waffle House. When he came back out to check on his pet a few minutes later, he climbed into the driver's seat and shut the door. But when he tried to push the electronic button to get back out, the door didn't budge. A sudden power failure had killed the battery, instantly disabling the car's electronics. Inside the heavily insulated cabin, the temperature spiked. James tried to honk the horn, but it was electric. He waved frantically at a couple walking by, but the tinted, glare-heavy windows hid him completely. As the heat climbed, he grabbed a pair of pliers and desperately bashed against the reinforced glass, but he couldn't crack it. Sweating heavily and struggling to breathe, James remembered the owner's manual in the glove box. He pulled it out, searching for an emergency override, but he was rapidly succumbing to heat exhaustion. Flipping through hundreds of dense technical pages required energy he no longer had. After 4 hours, both James and his dog died inside the vehicle. This diagram shows a hidden mechanical failsafe in that Corvette. Beneath the driver's seat is a physical release lever. Pulling it unlatches the door, bypassing the electrical system. James never touched it. The exact instructions were buried on page 80 of the manual. The convenience of modern engineering often strips away our basic mechanical understanding. Our safety is directly tied to our willingness to read the fine print of the environments we buy into. But an environment doesn't need to be wired with complex electronics to be lethal. A completely natural, analog setting holds the exact same capacity to turn into a fatal trap if you misread your surroundings. In August 1862, a 17-year-old French immigrant named Jean Leroux was splitting firewood on a farm in Ottawa Township, Minnesota. Suddenly, a barrage of gunfire echoed from the river. Knowing that neighboring settlements had recently suffered violent territorial raids, Jean grabbed his rifle, his life savings, and a notebook, and sprinted into the dense woods to escape. Jean knew these woods intimately. He bypassed the thickets and ran straight for a massive, ancient oak tree he frequently visited. The trunk of the tree was entirely hollow. Realizing he would be outmatched in the open, he slid himself down inside the tight wooden cavity to wait out the attackers. The gunfire turned out to be a false alarm, just soldiers on a passing boat wasting ammunition. But Sean never returned to the farm. When he slid into that hollow trunk, his body became hopelessly wedged in the timber. He was entirely hidden from the outside world, unable to climb out or signal for help. 57 years later, a logging crew cut down the oak and found his mummified body, still clutching his belongings. Whether it's a computerized car door or a hollow wooden trunk, the immediate physical environment is always a cage. It only takes a single lapse in situational awareness to lock it. A personal blind spot can end a life in an afternoon, but in the hands of a detective, these same unseen details become the ultimate tool for accountability. Investigators operate on the reality that no perpetrator can perfectly account for the traces they leave behind. In 2003, Monique Lunet was brutally stabbed to death in her home in suburban France. Police arriving at the scene assumed they were dealing with a highly capable killer. The attacker had meticulously cleaned their tracks, fleeing the scene to burn their blood-stained clothes in a stove and throw the murder weapon into a public trash can miles away. The physical crime scene was sterile, but the killer's downfall came from a completely passive anomaly. Earlier that evening, a man in a neighboring town received a call on his cell phone. When he answered, no one said hello. Instead, he heard the faint, muffled sound of two women talking in the background. It was an accidental pocket dial. He put it on speaker, and he and his wife listened as the women explicitly discussed bloody pants that needed washing and coordinated a fake alibi for a man named Jean-Luc. The killer successfully erased every physical piece of evidence from the actual crime scene. Yet they were caught because modern criminals are rarely undone by the messes they fail to clean up. They are undone by the invisible, digital data they don't even realize they are broadcasting. Sometimes recognizing a blind spot means an investigator has to actively create one to protect the truth. When Dr. John Yelnick was murdered in his Pennsylvania home in 2006, Corporal Janelle Lyde arrived to a chaotic, bloody scene. She quickly identified her prime suspect, but she faced a systemic roadblock. The suspect was Kevin Foley, a well-connected Pennsylvania state trooper. Lyde recovered crucial tissue and blood samples from underneath the victim's fingernails. Standard protocol mandated she immediately submit this biological evidence to the state police crime lab. But she knew that sending evidence implicating one of their own risked the samples being tampered with, being intentionally lost, or quietly erased. So Lyde committed a deliberate breach of protocol. Instead of logging the fingernail clippings into the state system, she packaged the samples in a small plastic container and hid them inside the break room refrigerator at her own local police station. For 10 straight months, she slow-played the investigation. She absorbed intense public criticism from the victim's family and the media for her apparent incompetence. She waited until the pressure grew so immense that the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office officially stepped in to take the stalled case away from her. That jurisdictional escalation was exactly what she wanted. With the Attorney General now involved, the case profile was elevated high enough to bypass the state troopers entirely. Lyde finally retrieved the container from the fridge and shipped the DNA directly to the FBI crime lab. The federal scientists matched the DNA to Kevin Foley, securing his murder conviction. When the justice system itself is compromised, standard procedure becomes a trap. Lyde's only weapon was to intentionally manufacture a localized blind spot, keeping the evidence entirely hidden in the dark until it was safe to bring it into the light. This dynamic scales up significantly when the entity trying to control the narrative is the government. In the remote, isolated mountain ranges of Afghanistan, the environment is vast enough to conceal almost anything from the outside world. In 2002, a heavily armed U.S. Army infantry patrol marched into those mountains and completely vanished. They failed to radio in a TIC, a troops in contact alert used to signal an active gunfight and call for backup. The sudden silence triggered the military hierarchy to deploy an elite Special Forces unit of Green Berets to find them. Hiking through the steep, unforgiving terrain, the Special Rescue Team found a narrow goat path littered with shredded military radios and torn combat uniforms belonging to the missing unit. They followed the path of debris up to a flat plateau that featured 3 massive, dark cave entrances cut into the rock. Mr. K and his partner carefully stepped into the mouth of one cave, their eyes gradually adjusting to the absolute darkness. They had only taken a few steps when a massive, hand-carved spear, a javelin the size of a fence post, erupted from the shadows. It impaled the soldier standing next to Mr. K, pinning him to the ground. Before the team could react, a 12-foot-tall humanoid with matted red hair and 6 fingers on each hand charged out into the light. It took a sustained, heavy barrage of gunfire from the surviving team members to finally bring the creature down. Helicopters arrived shortly after, securing the anomaly in a massive cargo net and flying it away. Back at base, the Green Berets drafted their official after-action reports detailing the encounter, but higher military command rejected the paperwork. The soldiers were ordered to rewrite the reports to state they engaged standard enemy combatants, forced to sign strict non-disclosure agreements, and the incident was heavily classified. If an event is too disruptive to fit the accepted narrative of a war zone, the institutional response is often total erasure. Mandated silence and redacted files become the primary tools for ensuring that inconvenient truths never leave the mountain. A fatal electrical glitch inside a parked sports car, a tiny DNA sample hidden behind leftover food in a police station fridge, a redacted file burying an impossible encounter in a classified mountain range. Our reality is governed by the information we do not have. Whether you are battling a malfunctioning machine, a compromised system, or a hostile environment, the ultimate survival skill is not brute strength. It is the relentless ability to look closely at the margins and find the exact details that everyone else left in the dark.